Hi and welcome to our Renowned Gamer series. I am joined by Elliot Sefton Nash, who looks like he's in some kind of space setup.
Hi.
How are you doing?
Very good, thanks. Very
Good.
I am. This is the surface of Mars behind me.
Beautiful, beautiful. I'm sure the Liquid Crimson office is equally as stunning to you.
More eventful.
Let's just start. We'll start at the beginning, Elliot. So if you could just give us a rundown of who you are and what you do and how you've kind of gotten to here, I guess.
Okay. I'm a planetary scientist and I work at the European Space Agency. So my job is basically as the interface between the agency and the science community. So I'm kind of representing both to both. So you're kind of always in the middle, trying to make sure that we get the most science out of the missions that we do, but also make sure that the science community understand what's possible and also what's affordable. So it's somewhere kind of in between diplomat and science management. It's a bit of a weird job, but
there's definitely a touch of communications there. Sounds fairly similar to actually being that the middleman that's passing information on. That's fascinating. So it's about kind of collating and kind of sharing the possibilities with the teams that you're working with and take it from there, I guess.
Yeah, it's kind of making sure that we're all organised to get the most useful knowledge out of the missions that we do, and also that the missions are designed in a way that they can produce that data that lets us learn stuff. That the most important science objectives have to be kind of baked into how the mission works. So it's trying to turn all the wheels that I can to make sure that we get the most out of it.
That's very cool indeed. Well, there's definitely some correlations, but let's go right back to the very beginning and talk about your earliest gaming memory, your favourite childhood game.
Oh yeah. Well, so I suppose when I was growing up, it was the era of, let's say, the Sega Master System, and then the Mega Drive came out, and that was big news. NES also, and then SNES. So I guess a lot of my childhood, with respect to console games, was spent playing on friends' N64s, GoldenEye tournaments, stuff like that.
Nice.
But on the PC as well, I was quite into Command & Conquer, Red Alert when that came out. That was good. Half-Life. And actually, my dad had a ZX Spectrum, so I was also playing a few vintage games. I was quite a big fan of Horace Goes Skiing.
Oh, nice. Yeah. And it really, this time, this period of gaming, kind of 80s, 90s, there's no console wars. There's no people getting upset about who's playing on which platform. We all just want to play games on all of the platforms, and that's cool. Things have changed so much; it's ridiculous. So, I'm going to go with, you briefly mentioned GoldenEye, so I'm going to say that is the one to call out from that list, because my goodness, that's a fantastic game. And the weird thing about GoldenEye, you can go back now and still enjoy it just as much. There's really no barrier to the enjoyment. It's fantastic.
Yeah, that's the measure of a good game.
Yeah, it really is, and the reason that Rare is a true jewel in the crown of the UK games industry. But we're not talking about Rare today. We may get to them one day. God bless them. So do you find that games create an escape for you, or do you think you find enough of that on Mars?
Yeah. It's interesting because they certainly do, and that's one of the reasons I really love playing games. It's a different world. It's being part of something else that's really rich. There's this whole fabric that you're part of that just doesn't exist in the real world. And especially now in COVID times, that's really important because you need an escape from the more mundane day-to-day that we have to live in now. So I think they do provide an escape, but weirdly for me, a lot of the games that I play tend to be space-based. So I find myself, for example, wouldn't it be fun to play a game where I'm some kind of, working in a space agency, designing missions and flying spaceships? Oh yeah, there is one like that, Kerbal Space. So I started playing KSP.
Oh, lovely.
And found myself basically doing my day job, and it's a bit reminiscent of, I remember a few years ago I saw, there was some news story about someone who was playing Farm Simulator, but they worked on a farm and they were just driving tractors at home and during the day. I find myself in the same situation.
It's quite bizarre, but I guess it's because it's a comfortable space, for want of a better term, for you to be playing Kerbal, for example, and yet less of the pressures, less of the worry, less of the, you know, having to be responsible, although you are, of course, responsible for what happens to your little dudes, and it can go horribly, horribly wrong, as I'm sure we've seen. Do you find that playing a video game after a long day of doing your day job and then kicking into a video game that's a similar kind of thing, are there any correlation, or is there anything that inspires you within games that you then take forward into your work? Or am I being way too good to us on the game side?
No, I think it's. In the specific case of KSP, I've learned a lot more about orbital dynamics. So I already knew some of that stuff, but now I was like, okay, I see why this is a problem. But I think it's having that refreshing escape where you're doing something completely different. You know, it's almost the same, at least to me, as taking a holiday somewhere where you just switch off, and then you come back with a slightly different view. So I think, you know, even if you don't necessarily get direct inspiration for your day job, you do get this kind of, when you revisit what you have to be doing day to day, it just seems a bit clearer, or you look at it slightly differently, so it helps you think around it a bit better, I think.
Energizing in a way.
Yeah, I would. Yeah.
To step out of it. So. Yeah, that makes sense. Do you have an example of a really kind of, whether it was exciting or heartbreaking, or, you know, what would be your most amazing moment in games whilst playing?
I think quite a lot of that for me is when there's a new game that comes out and it's supposed to be, you know, groundbreaking. You hear about it and you've got mates that have played it and you're like, oh, it sounds quite good, I might play it. And then you're just blown away because it's really something new. I feel like there have been a few moments in my life where that's happened. Like when I got, you know, I upgraded the graphics card and I had a Voodoo 3 back in '97 or whatever it was for my PC, and then I played Need for Speed. I was like, oh my god, this looks incredible. Or, you know, playing Half-Life where you could look up and down and not just walk forwards and backwards like in some other first-person shooters of the previous stage. So yeah, I mean, that the effort that goes into developing games to make these breakthroughs, which have just, you know, become exponentially amazing, is really impressive. And I think for me, those moments where you're like, "Whoa, people have really thought about this." Yeah. It's just really impressive. It's a feat of engineering that I appreciate.
Absolutely. And it's those, you know, it's that kind of hook, as it were, when you first pick up something for the first time and you're super excited about it and everyone's talking about it and it's been in development for years. And it's not just the playing. For me, the test is almost in the first time I step away. And if I step away and I'm doing something, the washing up, whatever it may be, taking the dog out, and something in my brain triggers the game I was playing, a movement, an action, a sound, then I'm like, oh, I'm in. I'm back later and I'm all over it. Yeah. So it's that kind of blurring of the reality.
The ability of a game to kind of bestow that sense of place into it, like you were somewhere else, and the environment that's been generated has really just left an imprint.
Yeah. So would you say there are any parallels? I mean, obviously we're working in cutting edge technology across the board, I suppose, with what we do and with what you guys do. But are there any correlations between your work and what we do?
I think probably balance is one maybe slightly tenuous way to describe it.
It's a good one, though.
Because I guess with game design and development, I assume, correct me if I'm wrong, I guess you'd be, you know, trying to optimize everything as much as possible, and also make sure it's as playable as possible. You want to keep people engaged, and finding that balance is probably quite tricky because there's probably stuff that, you know, game designers or developers want to do, but it just doesn't necessarily make sense for some parts of a particular game, and there's other stuff that maybe, you know, is like a really kind of mundane thing to work on, but actually it makes a really playable game. So I feel like finding that balance in your day-to-day work is probably a bit of one of the similar challenges that at least I find, because you have to try and make sure that everybody the solution that produces the least worries and the least, you know, bad reactions. It's nice to have an optimum solution where everybody agrees, but more often than not, it's where the least people disagree.
And that environment is where you make the best decisions, because you're limited, and you have to be limited because it's not just one person's show. So when it comes to game development, they're the moments when things get really whittled down and you realise that, okay, what I wanted to do is probably not possible. But this sounds like it's fairly similar, so we'll run at that. And I wonder if it's one of the things that we really kind of subscribe to in games is the notion of failing quickly and failing often, because there's no time, right? So I wonder if that's something that you guys tend to use as well.
Yes and no, because I think space missions are really expensive. So
that's it. You've got to fail before you even get to the point of going with the mission.
Right. So before you even think about proposing a mission or really putting something together that looks like a mission, all the pieces of that are studied to death for a long time beforehand. So the idea that there's this, we'll try this, see if it works. I think these days it's much more mature than that by the time we get to something that people would recognize as a mission.
Mm-hmm. So if you could have any job in games, you don't have to go to university, I'm not going to test you on it, it's fine, wake up tomorrow morning and you're going to be the games developer of your dreams. What are you doing? What are you going to do at work today, Elliot?
Well, that's a really good question. And honestly, it's a bit difficult to choose without knowing what the full range of jobs are. But, developing, I think, engines would be really interesting. Being part of that infrastructure and trying to figure out, writing the rules of the universe in a way sounds really fun.
Yeah.
So without knowing too much about it, I guess I would be working on engines and the underlying physics of games.
That's such a great way to put it, that you're kind of creating the universe, as it were, like making the central point that everything will start to work around. And just as an absolutely shameless plug, we did interview some of the guys from the Frostbite team at EA about that engine, and it was fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating, because much like with you, I got to sit there and go, tell me, what is an engine?
Right.
What is Mars? Tell me about these things. And it was really cool to get that kind of real deep information, but also the kind of the wider picture. So yeah, I think that's a fantastic choice, and I recommend that you watch that. I will make sure I send that video over to you, just in case you fancy a career change. Doesn't have to be now, in time. It's kind of a double question. We'll get to the hard question of the interview, because obviously we're here to talk about Guildford. We're here to talk about the festival itself is all about shining a spotlight on our amazing development home. So do you have a favourite studio or Guildford game that you'd like to talk with us a little?
Yeah. So I think. I think honestly the game that sits best in my mind is Need for Speed, because I grew up playing that a lot.
Fantastic.
And it was just so playable and really, really fun. I don't think there's anything more to say except that
I think that's a fine choice, to be honest. I think it's a fine choice, and EA are very much the pillar in the middle of Guildford that's brought us all, kind of tucked us all in. So. Fantastic choice. Choice.
But I would also say No Man's Sky is particularly incredible. And that goes back to one of the earlier questions about, how really the physics of a game and the kind of way that something is generated. But, procedural generation is really fascinating to me, because in a way, it's the thing that best replicates the physics of our own universe. That's basically how it works. These fractals are everywhere. If you use them in games to generate these, infinite landscapes and kind of worlds, it's almost like it's becoming more real, I think.
Well, that's it. That each one of those worlds feels real. You can step out and at no point do you think it's just reskinned, it's just a similar. Like, it's not. It never is. It's every time It's an entirely new world, and you can, it's tangible. It's there.
So props to Hello Games.
Yeah, definitely. And to be honest, to hear a planetary scientist say that video games are fantastic is quite something. So thank you so much, Elliot, for taking some time to talk to us.
Thank you.
And we should play some games sometime. We should find all of the space games and just do a one long stream of playing space games with space scientists. I think that could be quite good fun.
I'll be there.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Elliot. Take care.
Thanks.